What is up, guys? Dzeeff here, and today I wanted to talk about Broken Line, a trap card released all the way back in Circuit Break a few years ago. This card was not very good on release. Basically, no one played it, and the people who did play it found it to be pretty lackluster. However, Pack, a fellow YouTuber slash Twitch streamer, has been playing this card in different trap decks for a little while now, and he's actually done pretty well with it. I remember seeing a BA trap deck like 6 months ago that played 3 in the main deck, and just this past weekend he side decked 2 copies in his topping New York City 3v3 deck list. So I know that Pack likes this card a lot, but I really hadn't been convinced until this recent top, and now I really do think Broken Line is one of the coolest tech options for back row decks right now. By the way, if this video ends up convincing you to buy Broken Line, please use my link to tcgplayer.com. It's in the description below, and any purchase done after clicking that link does help out the channel quite a bit. Before we talk about the specifics with Broken Line, let's talk in general about how modern trap decks are able to break boards when going second. Historically speaking, going second with trap decks has never really been optimal. You obviously want to go first and set up all of your back row, but a lot of people recently, like over the last 2 years, have tried a new approach, and basically what they do is they'll use a card like Torrential Tribute or Needle Sealing or Rivalry of Warlords or Goes and Match, which then forces the combo opponent to use a card like Borreload Savage Dragon, otherwise they'll lose their entire board. So all the trap player needs to break that board then is a card like Torrential Tribute plus a card like Solemn Strike or Infinite Impermanence or another monster effect negation card. But what really matters here is that Solemn Strike is a lot better than the other trap card choices because that one's a counter trap, which means your opponent can only respond to it with other counter traps. If you have a card like Infinite Impermanence, for example, which does work in some situations, oftentimes your opponent might just have a second negation for that card too. So now that we've established that one of the best ways for trap decks to break boards is by comboing a card like Torrential Tribute plus a card like Solemn Strike, let's take a look at Broken Line, and you guys might see how this fits in. Broken Line is a counter trap card that says when a spell / trap card or monster effect is activated in this card's column while this card is set, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy that card. Basically, in the best case scenario here, Broken Line is 1, 2, or 3 extra copies of Solemn Strike that you then can combo with cards like Torrential Tribute or Needle Sealing, and that does make a pretty big difference. Solemn Strike has been one of the best trap cards going first and going second for trap decks for a long time now, and Broken Line is basically just extra copies of it in the right situation. When you're able to open up with Broken Line plus a board breaking trap card against your opponent's full combo board, all you have to do is set the Broken Line in the same column of the monster card that you think they are most likely to use against your Torrential Tribute or Needle Sealing or whatever. So in that case, instead of having to use a Solemn Strike, you now have 3 more copies of a Solemn Strike type card. But just in general, Broken Line can be good even outside of that situation. For example, you can set Broken Line in the same column underneath one of the extra monster zones. Your opponent is pretty likely to summon a card in one of those 2 zones, so the Broken Line could potentially negate a strong effect even if your opponent doesn't have a monster on the board when you set it. This works even better if you play a deck that summons a monster to one of the extra monster zones. For example, in Altergeist, you could go Meluseek into Link Kribo, and then you could place the Broken Line in the other extra monster zones column. So Broken Line isn't only good when going second. Unlike Solemn Strike though, Broken Line can even negate spell and trap cards too, so you could theoretically use it to stop a very powerful spell or trap that your opponent might use. This could be used against a Pendulum deck by placing it in either the far right or the far left column, but also just in general, and I think Pack talked about this as well in one of those older deck profiles, Broken Line could just be placed in the middle column because a lot of people just instinctively will use cards in the middle column. Now you might be asking yourself, wait a second, Broken Line sounds very good, but if more people know about its existence, then the card does lose some value, right? And that is true to some extent, but as Pack talked about in one of his deck profiles, the card isn't even that bad even if your opponent knows about it, because then they might overthink things. You know, maybe you set a card in a column of one of your opponent's strong monsters. Now they think it's a broken line, so they might hit it with a Cosmic Cyclone or a Nightmare Unicorn, when in reality it was just a bluff. That is definitely a pretty big advantage of playing broken line, even if your opponent knows about its existence. It's generically good against combo decks, of course, but just in general, even against control decks, it can be pretty strong, negating their back row cards. In that case, it's not so much acting as another Solemn Strike, but instead it's acting as another Solemn Judgment, almost like a more versatile wiretap in some situations. Yeah, the column part of this card's effect can be a bit tricky to get used to, but I think in general it is still a very powerful card that's good not only going second, but also first. Furthermore, I want to briefly bring up Fuseline, another trap card released in Circuit Break. This card is very similar to Broken Line in many ways. This is a normal trap card that says, while this card is set, target one card on the field and this card's column, destroy it. Now, right now, I think that Broken Line is much better than Fuseline, but I want you guys to keep this card in the back of your mind, because someday in the future, Fuseline might be just as good as Broken Line is right now. Basically, in a format where you don't care about negations as much as you care about popping cards, Fuseline is a lot better than Broken Line. Now, right now, we're not really in a format like that, but it has happened where in the past, negations aren't as good as simply destroying cards, and if we get a format like that again, Fuseline looks pretty darn good. I've talked about this in the past, but one of my favorite things about Link monsters being added into the game was that suddenly people had to really think about where their cards were getting placed. They really had to think about columns especially. So cards like this have a chance to see competitive play versus back in the day when we had cards like Blasting Fuse that really didn't work for a number of different reasons that I've talked about in the past in one of the episodes of the weird Yu-Gi-Oh! Card Effect series. But yeah, column cards are cool. These cards are pretty good, especially Broken Line right now. So I think that if you guys haven't tried Broken Line out, now is the perfect time to do so if you are a back row based player. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll see you later. Goodbye.